Hello and welcome to the Speed Chess Super Swiss. I'm Women Grandmaster Dina Belenkaya, and here with me, Grandmaster Jun Ludwig Hammer. Today we have a 15-round Swiss, and we will have a lot of action because there's going to be 16 players who will qualify to the knockout stage, which will take place tomorrow. Let us take a look at the format of this event. Here we have, as mentioned today, a 15-round Swiss, and the time control is 3 minutes without any increment. And once again, only 16 players will qualify. And let us now take a look at the prizes. Jon, how much money can we win here?
The prizes, may I say, are massive. It's a $4,000 payout to the first place finisher, $2,500 for second place, third, fourth, fifth, down to 16th. No one goes home empty-handed. But the biggest prize of them all is that the winner of this whole tournament series will get a spot in the Chess.com Speed Chess Championship main event. And that's going to be decided tomorrow in a knockout tournament. So first today, the 15 rounds of Swiss, finding our 16 participants for tomorrow in the knockout event. And the winner of the knockout qualifies for the Speed Chess Championship main event.
That's correct. And we also know that the last year, the winner was the one and only Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. And the question is, who is going to push him away from this spot number one? Jun, do you have any expectations here, any preference for the winner of the 2021?
I think any event of this standard, there's too many good players to single out one specifically. So for me, it's an incredibly open field. Anyone could win it. And first of all, today, I think that $4,000 prize, that is the goal, the secondary goal, getting in among the top 16, and then showing what they're good for tomorrow in the knockout stages.
Absolutely. We will have games starting very soon. But before that, let us take a very quick break and let us be back shortly. Coming in October, the FIDE Chess.com Grand Swiss. This year's event will be played in Riga, Latvia. 2 spots in the 2022 Candidates Tournament and 1 spot in the next Women's Candidate Tournament are up for grabs, as well as $550,000 total prize fund. Who will take the next step to becoming world champion? And here we are back to the Speed Chess Super Swiss. We're about to start the round number 1. Today we have once again the 15 round Swiss, and only 16 players will qualify to the knockout stage, which will take place tomorrow. But before the games begin, Yoon, are you playing in Riga?
No, actually, this Chess.com FIDE Grand Swiss is such a good tournament. I'm not even qualified. So that's unfortunate. But we'll be watching a lot of the top players of the world trying to qualify for a spot in the next candidates tournament, which is a tournament to qualify for the world title. So that's going to be exciting. What's also exciting is the tournament we have ahead of us right now. And the games just started. We can see the players, among them Hikaru being the #1 seed. Now, this is worth noting. Hikaru is actually not eligible to play in the knockout stage should he make it in the top 16. Because he is already qualified for the Speed Chess Championship main event. So he's just here because he wants some of that $4,000 first prize, understandably.
Yeah, that is a very good reason indeed. And well, Hikaru is here also for the pride, to prove once again that he is the strongest. And what is also interesting is that today we play 3+0. So it's quite different from the more usual to most of the players' time control, which would be 3+1. And Yoon, how good are you personally in this 3+0? Do you think it can affect players like Hikaru, this difference in the time control?
I think Hikaru is just a well-rounded player, but personally, I am an old man and prefer having some increments when the going gets tough. Here in Hikaru's game, we can see that he has opted not to castle early on in the game. He castles just as he sees where Black chooses to put their king. So I think Hikaru did that on purpose there, that he waited to castle because he wanted to put his king on the same side of the board as his opponent. Hikaru, with what is known as the double fianchetto positioning, has both bishops pointing in towards the middle of the board, and he's not using his pawns in the middle, because putting those pawns in the middle would now block his bishops. And that's going to be a big part of his strategy moving forward, how to find good placements, how to bring those bishops into life.
Yeah, sometimes this system is known as hippopotam, or how do you call it?
The hippopotamus.
Yeah, that's correct. And yeah, well, it is particularly interesting here that white has no center. And normally this is not something that we do recommend to play for beginners, but this is Hikaru and this is also blitz.
Yeah, so right now, Black has 2 central pawns excellently placed, controlling both light squares and dark squares on Hikaru's side of the board. But he's going to try to undermine that center eventually. And actually, as I said that, Hikaru had found a method to win one of the pawns. And suddenly Black's position goes from being solid and seemingly good with those pawns in the middle to just losing a pawn right there in a skirmish. And with the pawn up, Hikaru, I think, is going to win this game and take the lead in the tournament.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's just an extra pawn, and also mind the fact that the cheap pawns are doubled, which makes it also half a point, I would say, as extra advantage to Hikaru.
Hikaru going for the exchanges between the pawns on the queen side. He wants to open up for his rooks. One of the problems for Hikaru, given that he has so many pawns, is that his rooks are struggling to find ways to contribute in the game. But here, Hikaru actually chooses to close down the situation on the left-hand side of the board, and he's now getting ready to get both of his rooks over to the right-hand side on the H file, where the rooks can try to infiltrate in behind Black's position.
And what is interesting here is that the position is mostly closed and Black has a bishop, White has a knight. So this could also be in Hikaru's favorite.
Yeah, and here the knight comes out on the edge, attacking both the rook and the black pawn. You cannot guard both pieces at once. The pawn will be lost, and I expect Zabanga here will have to resign, having lost 2 pawns against the mighty Hikaru.
Well, he definitely will not resign. He will continue to fight, but he won't have much time because he only has 11 seconds, so he will probably lose on time. That would be my guess.
And that no increment is important to pay attention to. There is no more time for Vazabanga, and that means you need, in 9 seconds, you need to turn this around from being 2 pawns down to actually winning the game. It is an impossible task. And Hikaru just pushes his pawns up the board, uses his rook to disturb Black's king. And now a 3rd pawn is lost. The pawn on G7 was surrounded. There was no way to defend it, and Black resigns.
Yes, and that is correct. We still have some other games. Would you like to have a look at the next board?
Yeah. What's exciting, once the first game finishes, we're so far into the round that the next game we look at is going to be some really exciting time scramble.
Yeah,
and here we see it is Bortnik with the white pieces having a massive advantage of a queen and a rook who wins in the time scramble. And that means there's it's been 6 minutes. And the next round is just going to keep going. That is the difficulty of a 15-round tournament like this, that they just keep on playing when the time is out. Here we have what is potentially the last game of the round. White is just trying to go back and forth, trying to get an undeserved half point on time, but is not successful. Bogdan Deak wins the game and takes a full point, joining Hikaru at the top of the standings. And
there we go for the round 2, which has just started, and Hikaru here is playing with black pieces versus advantage RU. And look at what Hikaru is playing. Are we going to see yet again a double fianchetto?
Yeah, it's on the board right now, but I don't really like Black's position still. Hikaru has allowed a massive expansion on the king side. The white pawn just started running and it was never stopped. It kept going, kept going, kept going. And it's now solidly placed on Black's side of the board. Yeah, it feels like a good position for white. But we know Hikaru is very resourceful, and maybe he'll figure out a way to deal with this long-term annoying white pawn on h6.
Yes, I also like the white center, and look at dark squares. Without dark bishop, Black's position is really weak.
Both kings going to the same side of the board. I am slightly concerned about the safety of White's far advanced pawn on the edge. The pawn on h6 has the protection now from the queen, but that could be something Hikaru wants to target in the long run.
Yeah, this pawn is extremely strong when it comes to both attack and an endgame, because this could be actually a future pass pawn as well.
I really like the way White has dealt with this position. I think just retreating the bishop now, and then starting to make some aggression on Black's king side. I want to keep my bishop safe and then get my queen up into the attack.
What is also interesting is that any knight can jump to f5 any moment, because this is going to be not possible to take the knight afterwards because of, once again, this weakness. And look what just happened. Queen g5, leaving bishop on d3 under attack, because we threatened queen takes f6 with a mate coming in too.
White gets the queen up into the attack. Hikaru not happy with the queen coming up, so he tries to force the queen exchange. But actually, there's no way for White to avoid this exchange. If White had retreated their queen, the knight on the edge would have been in trouble. Hikaru has successfully removed White's main advantage, which was attacking prospects against the Black king. And now the pawn on h6 is under attack. The Black knight is already ready to capture it, and the advantage has gone over to being Hikaru's, because of that far advanced pawn being a major weakness White is unable to defend. And that's kind of, it goes to see that allowing that advance was something Hikaru did on purpose, because he believed that sometime in the future that pawn was so far advanced it would be difficult to defend. And that's precisely the situation we've gotten right now.
Yeah, and the only question right now is why Hikaru is not playing. Look how much time it took him to play a5. What wouldn't he like in knight h6 case?
Yeah, I think White is working very hard to make knight c4 happen. White wants to infiltrate with their knight, trying to eliminate the pawn on d6. And Hikaru is very scared of these kind of threats. And Hikaru is spending a lot of time trying to make improvements on the left side of the board before he captures the pawn on the other side. And I think actually this was brilliant play by Hikaru, but it took him so much time to figure out. He's down to less than 30 seconds on the clock. Yes, he managed to win the pawn, and he managed to win the pawn under such circumstances where White didn't have like a clear plan on how to move on further. But I don't think Hikaru knows that this is all the time he gets, and White resigns. A terrible decision by the White player. Hikaru played this Grand Prix tournament last weekend. And last weekend, they got a second extra per move that was being made. That is not the case today. Hikaru only had 23 seconds left to complete the game. Yes, obviously he was winning. He had won 2 pawns. But with 23 seconds left, it's so easy to make a mistake. It's so easy to lose on time. And advantage should have taken advantage of that fact, and that resignation was a terrible decision.
Yeah, it was a terrible mistake. I guess it's all about fearing Hikaru. Well, no one should fear anyone in chess. And here we have Bogdan Dik, who is playing with white pieces, and he is about to convert his advantage, both material and advantage on the clock.
That white pawn just rushing up the board. There's nothing stopping it. White's king also way into enemy territory, but capturing pawns along the way. There's no defense for Kezin Roman. Deak is going to win this. And with that victory, he's going to keep pace with Hikaru. The 2 top seeds of the tournament, the 2 players, both above 3,000 in their Chess.com rating. They have both won their first 2 games.
I'm still looking for any other games that we have in progress, but as you say, there is no increment here, so everyone will finish at the same time.
And that means the next round will just start pretty immediately afterwards. The players don't really get much of a break if they were the last to finish. However, there will be breaks during the tournament. After 4 rounds, we will have a 3-minute breather to study the standings.
That is correct. And here we have round 3. Hikaru is playing Arseny Nesterov, Grandmaster, young Grandmaster from Russia. And guess what? I have just seen Arseny an hour ago on the closing ceremony of the Russian Rapid and Blitz Chess Championships.
And then Nesterov also with 2 points in the first 2 rounds. The system, Swiss, means that you play against opponents that have done about as good as you have. And that means Hikaru's opponents right now will just become tougher and tougher.
That is correct. And here we have a very strange situation on the board. Look at the position. Isn't it too calm for someone like Hikaru?
Well, Hikaru is a universal player. He excels in most situations. And right now, White is happy to have the 2 pawns in the middle of the board. Pawns are best when they stand next to each other. And the white pawns are controlling both dark squares and light squares on black's territory.
Yeah, this kind of structure is very well known as Pila structure in our soon-to-be Russian chess school. It is particularly famous for being possible from many openings, coming out from many openings. And look at the position now. Bishop took on a5. Now Hikaru has an amazing pawn structure, having a clear advantage with this passed pawn a on the queen side.
Yeah, he really managed to change the circumstances of the game in his favor. As you were saying, a very solid situation going on for black has been altered into white now having a passed pawn on a3. A passed pawn is a pawn that doesn't really face any opposition as it tries to move forward to become a new queen. And another thing here highlighted by Hikaru, the rook pointing down on black's pawn, thinking that we might be able to capture this pawn in the future. However, Nesterov, he is not going to let Hikaru get away with this without a fight. So he manages to advance his own pawn, and now black seems like you're about to capture the pawn on a3. This pawn we talked about being dangerous on the edge of the board can now be captured by black's rook. And that would create a situation where all the pieces are on the same side of the board, which often results in a draw. The problem is there are 2 dangerous white pawns here now, and you cannot capture both of them at the same time. And Nesterov, instead of capturing either one, he actually just plans to have even more resources pointing in towards the most far advanced white pawn. Interesting decision, complicated play. I expect Hikaru to have to think about this for a while.
Yeah, there are different options. For instance, rook d1, trying to defend this d6 pawn and also create an extra x-ray in the future if knight takes on d6. And you know, I think that for white it is way more important to save the d6 pawn than the a3 pawn, because a3 pawn is far too passive.
Yeah, that is true, but at the same time, I feel like the pawns that are the furthest away from the king are also the pawns most likely to become a new queen. So Hikaru here thinks for a bit and decides to move his queen over to protect the pawn on the side. And Nesterov once again faces the decision whether he wants to capture White's pawn in the middle. At the moment, Black is down a pawn, but he also is attacking two white pawns at the same time. And Hikaru now, I'm not sure Hikaru realized the last game that he doesn't get any extra time. He kind of got away with it because his opponent resigned. And once again, Hikaru is down to just 30 seconds. His opponent also at 30 seconds. This is going to be a big time scramble coming up.
Yeah, well, you will need a kind of technique pre-moving, but I am pretty sure Hikaru is extremely strong at this one.
Yeah, but I'm not sure he knows that when his clocks runs out, he doesn't get any more time. And then let's look at his reaction now as the seconds comes in with the decimals. Does Hikaru realize that he is not getting an extra second per move he makes? Hikaru moving his queen up. He has a devastating attack with his rook and queen working together. But why is Hikaru not moving? The black king just tries to escape the corner of the board, but there's no escaping. The white queen comes in at the right moment, manages to prevent the black king from moving back, and the white queen coming in for the checkmate. Wow. Very well executed attack by Hikaru. And I am amazed at how calm he is when he's low on time, because I really thought there that he was about to lose on time.
Amazing win by Hikaru. And it seems like after all, king safety was way more important than the time on the clock.
Yeah, well, checkmate, finishes the game. And Hikaru has the confidence to think he can get that checkmate when he has a great attack going on. Another person who checkmated is Sanan Shugirov, getting his rook down, checkmating Black's king. That's going to put Sanan at 3 points as well. We do have the standings on our screen right now. And the standings say Hikaru, Bogdan, Alexander, Terry, Sanan Shugirov, Sarah, wonderful time. There are a lot of players still on 3 points out of 3 possible. As we move into the 4th round, where we have Hikaru versus Hans. And it's an English opening where Hikaru follows Magnus's play in a recent tournament. And it seems as though Hikaru was prepared for this circumstance, considering how quickly he's moving. He's given away his bishop that controlled the dark squares, but instead he's playing in a very controversial fashion where Black has accepted doubled pawns. And these pawns, they are not only doubled. I'm talking about the pawns on c6 and c7. They are also isolated, which means that you're unable to defend those pawns with other pawns. So I would say a controversial play in the opening by Hikaru so far. But on the other hand, he's really pushing down towards White's position. And I really like this last move from Hikaru. He's about to sacrifice. He's locking in White's bishop on g2. The bishop on g2 is now just pointing in to his own pawn on f3. The bishop is unable to contribute to the game. And Hikaru will try to create a checkmating attack close to White's king because he has to. Hikaru at this stage has already given away a pawn. His only way of justifying the pawn sacrifice is to get a checkmating attack.
Yeah, that is amazing strategy and a very general approach by Hikaru. And sometimes we even call this bishop as a pawn. Here, Hikaru will have to defend the c7 pawn or maybe even not.
And we have a comment in Twitch chat from Christian who says that Hikaru did in fact think that he was getting 1 second increment per move. Which explains why he was so calm. He wouldn't have been able to be that calm in the finish of the last game had he known that he was about to lose on time. Also on our screen, Hikaru is not the only person streaming this event. Hans Niemann, known as Hans on Twitch here, he is streaming this game where he's playing against Hikaru. And Hans sacrifices his rook for a knight in the middle. It's a brilliant sacrifice because Hikaru has trouble with his queen. The black queen needs to defend the rook on e8. So the queen needs to defend the rook because white's queen is pointing in. But the problem is the queen doesn't manage to both protect the rook on e8 and protect the bishop on b7. And that means Hans, with this temporary rook sacrifice, is getting back more than he gave away because he's about to capture the bishop and there's nothing Hikaru can do about it.
And now rook takes b7 is the next move, and then the queen takes b7, we'll have queen takes e8, winning back the material. And well, this is interesting. Hans has stopped.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow, what a move from Hikaru. He sees that there's no hope in that situation if his queen captures the rook. So he chooses to take the bishop instead. And now black's queen is trying to infiltrate, trying to use those aggressive pawns to try and get at white's king.
Yeah, looks like there is still some resources to defend this position, but it's definitely not queen b5. Oh no, not queen b5.
And the queen infiltrates. White tries to give a check on the black king. The check is parried by the black rook. There's no way for Hans to prevent checkmate because the queen is about to step into the position via the f2 square. And when the king has been forced away, the bishop will be unguarded on the f1 square. And he's losing the bishop. And he's trying to survive by moving his king up the board. But as we see on the left-hand side, the computer evaluation, the bar on the left is just completely black, which means that black is winning this game. And Hans, a devastating defeat for him. It seemed like he had tricked Hikaru in a brilliant fashion. But as it turns out, Hikaru managed to make some decisions to make white's life as difficult as possible. And he succeeded in swindling the game. Down a bishop, he infiltrated with the queen. And not only did he survive, he even won the game.
Yeah, that was a brilliant play by Hikaru. He did ask some difficult questions that Hans couldn't resolve in the practical way. Let us see if we still have some other games running right now.
Wow, what a position. Two white rooks fighting against a queen, and with just seconds on the clock, who's gonna win this? The rooks managed to take out the queen. The problem is black still has very scary pawns that's gonna be moved forward, trying to become a new queen. I think, oh yes, white has managed to stop the pawns just in time, but there's also the matter of the clock situation. White manages to stop the pawns, but doesn't manage to complete the checkmate before the clock runs out. It's a draw in the end because black doesn't have any way of winning with just a king remaining. So that was the first 4 games. We have 5 people with a perfect score so far. And we're going to be seeing more of this action after a break.
And welcome back to Speed Chat Super Swiss. I'm Woman Grandmaster Dina Belenkaya, and here with me Grandmaster Jun Ludwig Hammer, and we are about to start the round 5 of the Super Swiss. Once again, only 16 players will advance to the knockout, which will take place tomorrow. But before that, let us take a look what we have on the standings after the round 4.
Yeah, it's a thrilling 5 men at the top of the leaderboard. Hikaru Nakamura among them, but he faces some difficult opposition moving forward. Alexander Bortnik from the Ukraine is up there. We have Sanan Shugirov from Russia. We have Terry Blair from Peru, and Miss Hanik right now at the very top. And that is based on their tie-break score. Basically, the better your opponents do, the higher up you're on the leaderboard in case of equal amount of points.
That is correct. And games are about to start. This time we'll be following other people who we haven't seen of their games yet. And there are so many streamers here in this tournament as well participating in the event.
And one of those streamers is Bortnik. Is that correct?
Yes,
Alexander
absolutely.
Bortnik.
And guess what? He is facing Hikaru.
Go figure. Even when we thought we were going to look at some games without Hikaru, here he pops up again. And once again, employing this double fianchetto system where he gets both his bishops pointing in towards the middle of the board. And notice how Hikaru is not putting his pawns in the middle immediately, because those pawns would then kind of be blocking the bishops. And this is known as a very modern take. If you showed this kind of play to people in the late 1800s, they would laugh you out of the cafe. But here on the internet, Hikaru is king. And if he says this is a good way to play, then, well, it's a good way to play.
And once again, this is not just a blitz 3+1. This is 3+0. There is absolutely no increment. So it means you need to be extremely fast. And playing such kind of an opening a system is a very good strategy, because all you need to do is to move fast, very fast.
Yeah, and Hikaru has already gotten a 30-second advantage on the clock. So his strategy is paying off.
And here we've got this very strong bishop on b2 threatening to the king. Would Hikaru start the attack one day?
Yeah, that could be interesting. I think Hikaru just wants to push his pawns forward in the middle. I would maybe start doing so immediately, or getting like a rook towards the center. And Hikaru allows the trade of bishops. But on the other hand, he says that he gets a really nice placement for the knight. The knight is protected by a pawn, and it's not possible for any black pawns to chase this knight away, which means it's going to be a thorn in black's side for a prolonged period of time.
And this is one weakness, but to win a game of chess, you need to create a second weakness. So how about we push the f pawn?
Ooh, I don't like that. I think Hikaru is going to try to win the pawn on a5. I think if there's anything he's singling out right now, it's that this pawn is potentially weak and could be attacked. And Hikaru moves his rook up, trying to point in against it. But look at Bortnik. Bortnik with his knight is trying to exchange with Hikaru's knight. And it's not clear how Hikaru is going to deal with this situation. To me, it feels like Hikaru has to accept the trade. He chooses not to, but that means his pawn in the middle is just lost. Terrible. I have no idea what kind of move Hikaru missed in that calculation, but right now Hikaru is the underdog in this game. He has lost a pawn. Bortnik with an extra pawn on the right side of the board. He's down half a minute on the clock. Could we see Hikaru showing his speed and maybe managing to win this game despite being down a pawn? You're shaking your head.
No, I absolutely don't think so. This position normally is supposed to be a draw, most likely. And if anyone can try to win, it's going to be Alexander. But Alexander is extremely strong when it comes to speed chess. And I do not think that 1 minute or like 55 seconds will not be enough for him to create any problem here.
And we see Black moving the pawn up in the middle. Hikaru wants trades. Bortnik saying no trades for you, sir. The theory is that trading would favor the defensive player, the player trying to survive. And Hikaru manages to get the trade he wanted. He manages to put the bishops up against each other. And right now, Bortnik has to be careful. He only has 30 seconds left on the clock. Hikaru had the opportunity there to go for a draw, but he chooses not to do it. And Hikaru is going for the win on time. And this is a dangerous situation for Bortnik. Bortnik has lost the pawn he had extra. And now it's Bortnik trying to salvage a draw under these new circumstances. It's a lot of moving back and forth. Bortnik down to just 17 seconds on the clock. Hikaru moving his rook, his king up the board. The white rook has to take care of the black pawn. Bortnik successfully surrounds the black pawn, but he has just 9 seconds left. Hikaru being very, very cynical here, using the clock to his advantage. Bortnik with just 6 seconds has gotten a theoretically draw position. With best play, this will become a draw, but he only has 3 seconds left to make it happen. And Hikaru is about to win a game. Oh, he could have taken the pawn.
No!
And it's a draw. It's a draw with 0.4 seconds left. Bortnik manages to create a position for the third time. It's the same position 3 times, not in a row, but as long as it has happened 3 times, it is declared a draw automatically by the server, and he's saved with 0.4 seconds left on the clock. What a way to survive that.
That's amazing, amazing technique. And I told you Bortnik would do it. I told you it.
Yes, you're a mind reader. I was concerned, but 0.4 seconds, he was completely in control there. Absolutely, never in doubt. And
all
we're
right,
moving
we still
on.
have some games, but looks like everybody is finishing their game, and that means that we are going to start the round 6 in any seconds.
Oh, what a finish. That was the top game of the round. And yeah, Bortnik survives. He was in some trouble. But that also means that both Bortnik and Hikaru, they have now lost their perfect score. And there's only 2 players remaining with 5 points out of 5. And that is the game we're going to be watching right now. It's Mishanik from Russia versus Terrible from Peru.
Yeah, and here we've got some kind of Bogo Indian. Is that correct?
Yes, I do believe that's the name of the opening. We have a situation where White, as is often the case, has better control over the middle of the board. I do think White right now is about to push their pawn forward in the center. No, chooses to move the knight instead. White's knight now threatening the black queen, and black has to make a decision whether to capture the knight with their knight or to retreat the queen. The queen has been retreated. The knights still standing up against each other, and it seems like both players are taking their time with the decisions at this point.
Yeah, that is correct. Well, objectively speaking, Black shouldn't have any problem here out of the opening. He did manage to take back the center and almost all the pieces are developed, although bishop on c8 is still not playing.
Yeah, and White's last move the pawn moving forward on the side, that was definitely aimed at preventing the black bishop from being able to use the g4 square, since the pawn now controls there. In the meantime, we had some captures in the middle. Black temporarily up a pawn, but the pawn on d4, there's no saving it. White has both their queen and their rook, and will capture it next move. The game moves to a new phase. The queens have been exchanged. We're seeing an endgame. In endgames, it's important to get our kings involved. And that's precisely what Terrible is doing. The king moving from the side in towards the middle, as White is focusing on just getting the pawns into the game.
What I like about this position is that White's bishop on g2 is way more passive than Black's bishop, because the d5 pawn looks so to be strong, but actually blocks its own bishop.
That is true, but also Black's bishop is pointing into the void. Like, the black bishop isn't really threatening anything. And right now, Mishanic looks to be actually taking over that diagonal. He's going to move his bishop up, offer a trade for Black's bishop. And then our discussion of the bishops is no longer relevant.
Yeah, but actually, that is not true yet.
Yeah, he managed to force Black's bishop away before getting that placement. And now he's offering the exchange, and he's offering to get doubled pawns in exchange as a result of the exchange between the bishops. And that's because doubled pawns, while usually considered bad, it has the advantage of removing the pawn from the open line, so that White now can get a rook over to the G file and point down towards Black's pawns, seeing as how the G file is now opened.
Yeah, so now Black has two weaknesses, which are pawn on d6 and pawn on g2. And normally that would be enough to convert the advantage. Here, I believe it's going to be about the technique and also about the speed with which moves are going to be played.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's White in control here. White has their king now about to have a superior position when compared to Black's king. Black tries to offer the exchange of pawns. White just says no trades for the player who's in a precarious situation. You want to keep as many pawns as possible with the white pieces, because you are the one searching for a breakthrough.
That is correct. Now I'm asking myself, and I already have an answer, White is going to change the position of the rook, probably to put it on the G file sooner or later in order to attack the weakness on G7.
Yeah, that's a good call. Also, the rook is going to be used to push the black king away. So the rook first makes sure that the black king is not contributing. Then the white king will move up, and then the rook can switch over to the side of the board. And Black realizes what's about to happen. He has a last-ditch effort trying to offer the trade of rooks, but that trade is favorable for White. You just capture it, move your king up, and then you have this extra move, a3. This is very important. The move a3 means that, okay, it was White's turn, now it's Black's turn. The black king has to yield, and when the king yields, the white king enters. And Mishanic is about to get a perfect score. He's going to be on 6 out of 6, and he's going to win this game.
That is amazing. It looks like Black simply blundered this a3 move.
I think Black's position was hopeless regardless. I think he tried to bluff that he could survive this pawn endgame, and Manik he understood that no, you're not gonna survive that, and I'm just gonna enter your invitation. Very often when someone offers a trade, you say like, no, I don't want to trade if you want to trade. But sometimes you cannot just be trusting your opponent. You got to make your own assessment. And that's what Mishanic did there. He went into the pawn endgame and it paid off for him. Here, a very exciting finish.
Yeah.
And yeah,
All the games
all
have
the
finished.
games finish about at the same time. And at the end of it, it's Miss Honig with 6 points out of 6. Fantastic performance so far by the Russian.
Yeah, and if I'm correct, I've also seen him an hour ago. There are so many players here who I have just in the Russian Rapid and Blitz. And you know what? I think that could actually help them because we have just spent a week playing Rapid and Blitz, and that gives you also a massive training when it comes to get ready for Speed Chess Championship.
Yeah, so maybe advantage for the Russian participants that they are competing in Blitz and Rapid this week. Here we see the top board, and once again, Hikaru is the chosen player to take down what is really the main thing we're interested in, Miss Honig. Whether he can keep his perfect score. He's now facing his toughest opponent for the whole tournament.
Yeah, and yet here we are once again trying to avoid Hikaru, but he is still following us as a destiny.
And Hikaru has won a pawn here initially. Hikaru with an extra pawn. In addition, he has the 2 bishops, which are infamous for working together. And especially on this board, look at how the bishops point in both directions on long diagonals. Those bishops are going to be the end of black if you don't exchange them off very soon.
And how about trying to exchange them now with, okay, knight d4. I was thinking about knight e5. Here...
Yeah, no, you definitely want to get rid of at least one of those bishops as soon as possible. And I think that's what Miss Honig is trying to do. And Hikaru refuses to cooperate because that's kind of how chess works. You have a plan, but your opponent's plan is often just preventing that you manage to get done what you want. And Hikaru here. Wow.
Wait, what? And after
wow.
bishop takes c2.
Wow, what a play from Miss Honig. He captures a white pawn, but there are some trickery. If that black knight is captured, he will not remain up a bishop. Therefore, Hikaru instead chooses to take black's bishop. And now the knight can capture the rook in the corner. The rook can capture the bishop in the middle. White's bishop can capture the black rook. It's easy to get confused. I know I am. And at the end of all this trickery, we're going into an endgame where Hikaru has an extra pawn. I think that's
an extra tempo as well. Did you see that rook f8 that was forced because of the bank rank mate?
So Miss Honig wanted to keep both rooks on the board, but it cost him by having to go in a defensive position with his rook. And now Hikaru has a dominating situation because his rook on a5 is doing a great job of putting pressure down towards the pawn on a7. The pawn on a7 needs constant supervision. So the black rook is forced to take a defensive position to defend to take care of its buddy. But similarly, the white rook is now busy defending the far advanced white pawn, and Miss Honig, he's doing a great job of surrounding that white pawn and actually managing to take it out. This was not the way Hikaru thought this was going to go. The pawn he had extra has been eliminated. White still has pressure towards the pawn on a7 with both his rooks pointing down against that a7 pawn. But black just says, there you go, have my pawn. I'm going to use my rooks instead to try and bother your king. And this is a very difficult situation to evaluate. both players with 2 pawns and rooks. The pawns are on opposite sides of the board, so we're going to see a race. Who can get a queen first?
Objectively, 2 connected pawns should be stronger, but here we have h4 pawn, which has advanced way too far. And also black's rooks are extremely strong, so I doubt Hikaru will manage to win this game.
Well, we've seen him use the time to his advantage previously, and here he has a 10-second time advantage as both players approach the 30-second mark. I'm going to say that Hikaru wins this thanks to his time. I'm not sure Miss Honig can. Oh, well, actually, there has been a question whether you want to trade rooks. I think that rook trade was very beneficial for Miss Honig because he just needs to move his pieces further down the board. I think we're about to see a queen versus queen situation. White can go for a trade. Hikaru accepts a draw, and that means Miss Honig manages to survive a position where he was in big trouble, and Hikaru doesn't manage to catch up. It's the Russian still in the lead.
Yeah, that is correct. Here we've got Benjamin Bog, who is streaming and has already won his game. And here we have Sinan Sugirov with white pieces playing against Kazakh fighter.
And look at that queen coming in to give the checkmate. And Sinan Sugirov is way up on the leaderboard. That point is going to rocket him up to 5.5 out of 7, which means he's going to represent a top 10 placement. Actually, as the standings updated, Sugirov is in 5th place. A great start to the tournament for him.
That is correct. Yet one more Russian player who has just come from intense training, and we are about to enter to the round 8.
And maybe Sugirov is the guy we should follow, having seen how he checkmated there in the very last seconds of the game.
Absolutely.
Sugirov, in this round, he's going to be facing...
He's facing ME Terrible. Yeah.
And, I really like that username because I believe his real name is Terry, but he makes it into Terrible. I don't know why, but I feel like it has to be pronounced with like a French schwung over it.
Yeah, why not? And here we've got a very classical way of setup for white. We have a normal development versus some kind of a Philidor, I would call it like this.
Yeah, white taking control in the middle, having those 2 pawns next to each other. That is the optimal setup, controlling both dark squares and light squares. However, Sugirov making the trade, which means that only one white pawn remains in the center. That white pawn is on a light square. Which tells me that Sugirov is probably going to be attacking the dark squares because that's where white now doesn't have as much control because your pawns often tell you what squares you have control over. And when your pawns are primarily placed on light squares, as is the case for Terrible here, then your dark squares will suffer a little bit as a consequence.
Well, to suffer of that squares, you do need to get rid of the bishop on g5, and that's why we have just seen h6 attacking the bishop. Now, what is interesting, white attacks the only weakness of black, which is the d6 pawn, which is a very good plan normally, but let us see what black goes with next.
Just moving the queen away. The queen in conjunction with the bishop, I think they're pointing to the right-hand side of the board. Is there any chance that he's planning to sacrifice a bishop to try and open up around white's king? Okay, no. The advantage of being a commentator is that you can give away the player's pieces as much as you'd like. You don't really have to live with the consequences. the evaluation bar, making some hefty moves on the side, indicating that mistakes were made, but that seems to have passed. Overall, I must say I like White's position. I like the control White has in the center. The White rooks are well placed. The knight is about to hit the f5 square. This is looking rough for Shugirov.
Definitely. And also we have the queen here pointing soon to be on the king of the opponent as well. We also have yet once again this static weakness on d6. And normally this is one of the reasons why such kind of positions are not great for black.
And White has gotten 3 pieces working together, attacking that black pawn on d6. Never mind, 4 pieces White has pointing towards that d6 pawn. But the pawn just runs away. You cannot it doesn't help you having all those pieces pointing towards the square where the pawn no longer is. And instead, we see a big mistake by Terry. A huge mistake. He thought he was very clever. He gave away his knight because he saw that he could win back the black knight afterwards. But he got hit in the end by the bishop, threatening the queen. And when the queen moved, the white knight was lost behind the queen. And Shugirov turns around, a very troublesome position. Now he's in the leader seat. And he's the one with an extra, with an advantage, and an advantage that is extremely significant. He has a full knight in exchange for a pawn.
And 49 seconds are more than enough to convert this kind of advantage. We have already spoken about it. Yeah, I actually think it's going to be an easy win. And are you going to object that?
Yeah, but last time you said that Bortnik was going to keep this at least a draw without trouble. He made the draw with 0.4 seconds left. So are you now predicting that Shugirov will give a checkmate with 0.4 seconds? Or are we going to have a massive margin here? Like, I don't know, 2 seconds.
The margin is going to be very big, and it's going to be at least 10 seconds because look at the clock. Both players are at the same time. In fact, Sinan is not an underdog anymore when it comes to time here.
Yeah, I will have to apologize for my agitation there. It seems you are absolutely correct. Shugirov having no trouble here, winning with his extra knight. As a matter of fact, he's managed to capture 1 or even 2 pawns in the meantime. And now he forces the white king up the board. He captures another piece. And Shugirov, with a bishop and a knight, will have no issues. He's not necessarily going to go for the checkmate. He's just going to play very quickly and make sure he's not losing on time.
Yeah, well, I do expect the checkmate sooner or later because this is what, oh, wow. Bishop e5, rook takes a5, and knight g4, amazing. Now Sinan is not risking anything anymore because whatever happens, he will not lose, and his opponent has just resigned. Look at this, 13 seconds for Sinan. Looks like I was very close.
I stand corrected.
All right, we do still have some other games here. We have, or we do not.
Hikaru has beaten Shimanov, so Hikaru keeps the pace. But Miss Hanik has defeated Bortnik, which means Miss Hanik still remains half a point ahead of Hikaru.
Yeah, that is correct. And it seems like all the games have already finished. And that was the round 8. And that means that we are about to take a very short break and be right back. The Blitz Coin Invitational starts October 27 and will feature 16 elite American players under the age of 25. Their prize, you guessed it, 1 Bitcoin. Don't miss out on seeing Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky and others battling it out for the Blitz Coin Invitational, sponsored by the Charlotte Chess Center. And there we are for the round 9, which will start in any second. And yeah, Jon, do you think Nishanik is going to win the tournament, the Swiss part of it today?
We're at the halfway mark. He's looking good, but it's too early to tell. There's so many more games to be played, 7 to be exact. And here we see Hikaru Nakamura is late to the round. Okay, and we're moving on to Miss Hanik's game. And he's playing another Russian, Sviridov, who I must admit I hadn't heard of until last weekend when I was doing commentary on the Speed Chess Grand Prix. But there's Sviridov. He was one of the top players. Maybe you can tell us more about him, Dina.
Well, I know him in person and he is playing quite a lot. He's very active, but it is true that he's way more dangerous when it comes to such a short time control. And he's indeed a very, once again, active player. So I say everybody should fear of him because he's definitely an underdog, but he should be treated with respect.
And he's making a pawn push in the center right now, but Black is very well placed to deal with it. Black has gotten both rooks on central squares. And as I said that one rook just whooped over to the side of the board. And that may have been the kind of defensive move that White needed to get their pieces into better positions, because right now White is getting ready for the rooks to double. He's going to play the rook up 1 square and then going to get that other rook moving over, and I think White actually has decent chances here with his central control. An exchange of bishops means that Black now also has a pawn in the middle that cannot be defended by other pawns. And White immediately tries to capitalize on that, moving the queen up and attacking the so-called isolated pawn. And wow, Miss Hanik, I feel like he's been making a lot of questionable decisions in a row. White's position just seems to be becoming better and better, while Black is now struggling with a king that is poorly protected, a knight in the middle, which is close to being trapped, and the white bishop also having a great position in the center.
Yeah, that bishop, remember, it was on c3 surrounded by both pawns. Now it looks like a very strong piece here, also coming to b6 soon.
Yeah, it's such a strong piece. The black knight moves around to try and take out the bishop. The bishop will not acquiesce to that, though. Oh, I was wrong. The bishop is... Sviridov accepts the trade of bishops. And I don't understand why Black is hesitating. I feel like having been given the option of eliminating that strong piece, you should just go for it immediately. But instead, he's spending precious seconds, and he's now down to less than 1 minute on the clock.
I guess the decision was questionable because of the fact that look at the b6 pawn. It is extremely strong. Also, we have this rook endgame. We know that rook endgames are normally supposed to be closer to draw, but this rook is on the b7, and this is a very doubtful position for Black. This rook b7 is just a monster.
The rook moves away so that we free up space for the pawn. The pawn moves forward. The pawn is just 1 square away from becoming a new queen. The question is, can the white rooks work together to help that pawn become a new queen? And the answer to that is yes, they can. The white rook in the corner will exchange itself for the black defensive rook. And once the defensive rook is gone, white will be able to shepherd the pawn into becoming a new queen. And that means Mishanik has lost his first game of the tournament, which in turn means that there are people who can catch up. Benjamin Bock is not one of them because he has just drawn this game. The question must then be whether Hikaru can win his game and go ahead of the Russian player. And right now, that is very much looking like the case. Hikaru had two white pawns way up the board, ready to become new queens. And Sanan Shugirov didn't know how to deal with it. He resigned. That means Hikaru is back where he belongs as the number one in the standings.
Wow, we still have some games going on, and here we have Bogdan Dig with 5 points on the screens and the rook endgame with a pawn up. Is that enough to convert to win with 20 seconds on the clock?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the time is really what matters here. And even though white is up on time right now, it's often easier for the player about to get a new queen to make quick moves. And that black pawn is just, the position plays itself. The king moves away, the pawn is helped forward. It's a check, so then you also lose your rook. And it turns out Bogdan didn't even need the time to work in his favor. He decided it on the board. And here's another weird duel because both players only have a rook left. And under normal circumstances, this would be a draw. But with the big prize pool and with Terrible needing to make up for some of the points he didn't get earlier, he's doing everything he can to try and win what is known as a very equal endgame. And he almost succeeded. But at the very last moment, there was an exchange of rooks, leaving only the kings left on the board, which means that the game ended in a draw. And no rest for those players who finished last. We immediately move on to the next round. And this time we're following our new hero, Valery Sviridov, who just came off a victory against Mishanik, the previous leader of the tournament. Let's see if he can continue that good trend.
Yeah, and Valery Sviridov is definitely not new to online chess. We already mentioned it before. He's just beaten Mishanik, and he was 1 point down the whole point, and now he is sharing the third place. And look at the position here in the opening. Valery is using the exact same technique in the opening that Hikaru has. So he's so to be learning from the best, playing, as you say, hippopotamus. This is how you pronounce it?
Hippopotamus, yeah.
And but there we
what
go.
Was that rook g8 move? Did you notice this rook g8 move?
Oh, that's correct. Wow, this is interesting.
It's such a weird move. I wonder whether he wanted to castle, but when you castle, you move your king, you don't move your rook. So I don't see how that could be a mouse slip. It's just a very surprising decision from the Russian. And look at Bortnik with his pawns. He's just moving all his pawns up the board. And right now, that's kind of Black's strategy. You're trying to provoke White into going super aggressive. 6 pawns has been moved 2 squares up from their starting position. And Sviridov is hoping the old saying, pawns don't move backwards. He's hoping that comes into play and will try to exploit the spaces in behind White's pawns.
But you know, from one side, this is actually very much reasonable, because when your opponent doesn't take the center, when your opponent plays passive, why not to use all that space that you can?
Yeah, I agree. I like White's position here. I think Sviridov's style of play is very unique, but it doesn't look good. But you know, sometimes it works because there are some trickery and you're able to get a time advantage by playing in an unorthodox manner. And that time advantage has certainly been the case here so far, with Bortnik being down 30 seconds on the clock in what to me looks like a very good position for white. And now the queen exchange. The queen comes up, gives a check on the black king, and white's queen is just devastatingly placed. And here comes the knight as well. Look at the light squares: c6, e6, f5. These squares, black is just unable to defend on the light squares, and white capitalizes by having a knight come in, capture a black rook. White now up a rook in exchange for a knight. He will now play g4. No, he will not play g4.
All the black's pawns are weak, and white has just so much choice here. Attacking c7, attacking f5, attacking h6, whatever you want, everything works. And here it looks like it's
but you need to decide quickly. You need to decide quickly, because Bortnik, he is not quick in his decisions, and he's now under 1 minute on the clock, and there's nothing worse than those knights jumping around, causing all sorts of trouble when you're low on time.
Wow, look at this. After bishop takes e5, there would be a mate in 2 after rook c7 and rook c8. It hasn't happened on the board for obvious reasons. Here, Bortnik managed to trade more pieces, and that means that his win is approaching.
Yeah, that previous move white had, moving the pawn up, just getting rid of the pawns so that you open up for the rooks. That was brilliant play by Bortnik. And the black resigns, as there's no way to stop both white rooks attacking down the files. That was an exquisite finish by Bortnik to pull himself up into the top placements of this tournament.
And here we have Miss Honey here with white pieces facing Alexander Shimanov, 2 Russian grandmasters. And who is going to be the one? Shimanov is a pawn down and also 20 seconds down. Seems like a very tough situation for him.
Yeah, white is going to win this. Look at how he infiltrates with his king. And then he's fine giving away his own pawn in the middle, because he knows that white king way deep into black's camp, that king is going to make it happen for him. And I think, yeah, I like the moves you're suggesting with your arrows. Using that pawn as a deflection, getting black's rook to kind of step aside. That was one good plan. But wow.
Somehow Miss Honey doesn't agree with me. Is there something we do not see?
I don't know. But he went with his king all the way from an aggressive positioning on the right-hand side to having an aggressive positioning on the left-hand side. And Shimanov blunders his rook.
Oh no, he pre-moved, but that was a wrong time for pre-moving. He just forgot the rook c4. He was expecting king b6. Moving on, we still have some other games, hopefully, or maybe not. All right, this is our favorite position. Look, who is playing for a win here? This is a question that I always ask myself whenever I see this kind of positions. Here, what is interesting, both players have the same time on the clock, and who is gonna be flagging who? No one. Wow, draw. I would not expect this one.
I mean, they blundered the rook several times during the course of the game, but it's more important to move quickly than make good moves. That was both players' philosophy in that circumstance, and in a way it paid off for them, because we got the fairest result in the end, a draw with a rook each.
Yeah, unfortunately, here we've got Alexander Bortnik facing Sanan Sugirov, and this looks like a very normal opening so far to me.
Then we have a different opinion on what's normal, because both queens have entered the game really early. The black bishop getting unusually active early on. And now there's a pawn moving up on the side of the board, potentially to disturb the white queen. To me, this looks like a very strange situation. And I feel like that can also be seen in the player's time management, because Shugirov so far has already 30 seconds less time on the clock than Bortnik, which really seems to indicate that he felt like this is not normal and this requires some extra thinking in an unusual situation.
And he has just captured the pawn. That explains such a long thought. And look at this knight on a5. It doesn't have any place anymore.
Yeah, but the queen is not doing great. Next move, I think black will move his pawn up to attack the queen. And I'm not sure where that queen is going to go afterwards. Okay, Bortnik, instead of harassing the queen immediately, he opens up for his bishops. The white queen not doing great at the moment. White has an extra pawn, but he struggles finding out how to get the queen back into the game.
Yeah, I definitely have some troubles to evaluate this position. From one side, we have this amazing center with a pawn on d5, and also our king has already castled. But from other side, our queen once again is misplaced. And also look at the knight on a4. It is about to fall, and you do not quite understand why, because there is the knight on a5, which is also quite trapped. So I guess we will see more in some seconds to come.
And I still maintain that the black should be trying to attack this queen very soon. And actually, I like Shugirov's last move now. By pushing that pawn up, he's preventing black from utilizing the c5 square for his pawn. So sometimes when there's a square, you don't want your opponent to move their pawn. You just put your own pawn there instead. And Shugirov now is giving back the pawn. The pawn on c5 can be captured by black. It's just that if you capture this guy, you're not even up a pawn because you gave away one earlier. So Bortnik tries to keep the position complicated by not accept. And a queen sacrifice. And he resigns.
Oh, it was a blunder.
It was not a queen sacrifice. It was a queen blunder.
Well, why did he resign?
He thought that the pawn was going to capture on c6. So he pre-moved.
Oh, no.
Can we go back there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was a great moment. Well, first of all, c6 is a blunder because there is knight takes c6. But that didn't happen. No, that did happen. Knight takes c6. And yeah, it looks like sometimes Sugirov simply forgot about his queen. That's a pity.
Yeah, no, if you go back, what he was expecting was that the pawn would capture the white pawn. So he said, okay, you're going to take that one. I'm going to pre-move. Pawn takes pawn back. But what happened, and this is the risk of making pre-moves, the move he had anticipated is not what happened, but he still had a legal pre-move. And when the knight captured, he automatically captured the knight as those were the circumstances of the pre-move feature. And he lost his queen because of it.
Yeah, and once again, most likely he simply forgot that the knight could capture as well, because this looks far way more logical than pawn takes on c6.
Yeah, so he missed the knight capture, and therefore his pre-move was just a terrible mistake. So guys, you cannot make pre-moves without risk. There's always a chance that it's going to come back to haunt you. And that game is going to haunt Shugirov now for some time. We move on, and here we have Dropstone from Russia.
Yeah, from Russia, facing Benjamin Bok from the Netherlands, who is, I believe, now in US and who is also streaming. And looks like he has absolutely no trouble in converting his advantage. And that being said, now I understand the time situation and I start a little bit worrying for Benjamin.
Yeah, but he has an extra bishop in addition to a lot of pawns. He actually there chooses to give away one of his pawns just to open up for maybe his king being able to walk up in the middle of the board. He's going to get a new queen. Yeah, that's good technique. And the rooks on the side of the board, giving the checkmate. Good play there from Benjamin Book. And that means he's up to 7.5 out of 11. That's going to make him stay in the top 16 who qualify for the knockout tournament tomorrow. Here we have Semete from Macedonia. No.
And
who goes ahead and wins the last game of the round.
Yeah, and that was round 11. We will have now round 12 starting in any second. And we have Hikaru with 10 out of 11 so far. And then we have Alexander Bordnik with 9 out of 11. And then Miss Honig 8.5. Let us see how Hans on Twitch is doing. And guess what? He's facing Alexandra. So that is very interesting for us.
Hans had a big game earlier today where he had a winning position against Hikaru. It looked as though he was going to make a big upset there, but Hikaru fought back brilliantly and not only managed to survive, but actually managed to win the game. So Hans has some avenging to do. And let's see if Bortnik is going to be the recipient of his wrath.
Yeah, and here we have a very simple, once again, position, I would say, at least for white, because white has a center. Now, black has 2 bishops. This could actually be interesting when it comes to the open position, and this position is open. Now, the question for black is when the bishop on b7 will be activated.
Yeah, because right now there's a black pawn blocking the bishop's diagonal. The problem is, if you move this pawn forward, then the pawn is going to be blocking the other bishop. So black's bishops not working together in a great way right now. And that means that is kind of the reason why Bortnik chose to go for this sort of play, because he believes the black bishop pair will not be able to achieve much, considering how the pawns and the rest of the pieces are placed.
That is correct. And now let's take a look how Bortnik is going to convert his advantage. And it looks like he's going straight to action with this e5 pawn push. Ooh, now the knight is attacked and the pawn on d6 is attacked. And what is interesting, if these pawns E and D are being traded, then the pawn structure would be very terrible for black. But we do not have that anymore. Knight takes d5, knight takes d5. And now we've got pawn takes d5 and e pawn takes on d6. So many trades. Look at the bishop on b7, still passive. Ooh, and the double pawns. I do not like black here.
Yeah, no, it was a very difficult strategic decision there. And Bortnik moving forward in the middle, I must admit, I was skeptical of that. But the situation he has managed to get on the board, look at the black bishops. The one bishop is pointing in towards white's pawn and is not really accomplishing much. The other bishop has it even worse, because that bishop is pointing in towards your own pawn. And at least when you're pointing towards the opponent's pawns, you're kind of threatening to capture them. But when your bishop is being blocked by your own pawn, that is not really the case. And stuff happened. Bortnik sacrificed a bishop on the side of the board, thinking he was brilliant. And that the black bishops were unable to contribute in defense. But Hans has demonstrated, after making a trade of rooks, he managed to get one of his bishops into the game. And now that black bishop is going to move away, and then the pawn will move forward in the center. Black's bishops have come to life as Bortnik makes a bad judgment call on when to strike and try to checkmate the opponent's king.
And look at the evaluation bar. It jumps so fast and looks like black is improving indeed, but has already missed something. We do not know what it was, but what we do know is that black position is just so good now, at least compared to what it was before.
White has an attack going on towards the black king. Hans is going to need to be careful about that, but there's no doubt that his bishops, which we were criticizing just 5 moves ago, they're now the pride of the board.
Yeah, and the only point on the board that white was attacking was a g7 square, but g7 is very much protected by the bishop on b2. So it seems like black has everything under control. Look at the time. Bortnik is down to 20 seconds, and that is not a good sign for him either.
I think Hans is going to go for the queen trade. Yes, Hans trying to make the queen trade happen when the bishops really will showcase their abilities. Hans offering also a trade of bishops. I'm not sure I like that decision because now Bortnik is trying to create an attack on the side of the board. Will Hans maybe try to get a new queen in the middle? It's looking as if Hans now got his bishop in a position where the bishop can help the pawn in the middle advance. And that's precisely what has happened. The bishop helped the pawn forward, and the pawn is now just 1 square away from becoming a new queen. There's no way to stop it. The bishop has done its job beautifully. Bortnik, he resigns. There's no way to stop black from getting a new queen. And Hans makes a big comeback with the bishop pair. And this goes to show that those bishops, even though we weren't big fans during the game, one little mistake from the opponent, and they can become just a monster on the board. And here we see Miss Honeck as well, another one of our regulars in the top 5 placements. He gets an important win against Alexander Zubow from the Ukraine. Miss Honeck winning much thanks to his pawns being so far advanced, getting ready to becoming new queens.
And seems like round 12 is about to finish. We still have some last hopes for the games. Oh yeah, here we have a game. Look at this, Grandmaster Benjamin Bock, our friend here is, oh, how did you see that?
The time situation meant he had to pre-move, and it's working out for him. He has pre-moved every move for the last 10 moves. He lost his queen. His opponent could have checkmated in 1 move, but that strategy of just making quick moves when you're doing terribly on time, it worked for him. He got the win in the end. I think if you study that in a replay, you will see every one of those last 10 moves were in fact pre-moves, and they were not great, all of them, but it was good enough to get a super important win.
That was hilarious, but you know what? This is 3+0, and this is what we are here for. And we are going to take a very short break because there are still 3 more rounds, the last rounds to decide who is gonna be in the top 16. Chess.com is your exclusive Twitch home for the video feeds for this year's World Chess Championship. Join us for the best coverage around as we watch this year's players, the defending champion Magnus Carlsen and the challenger Jan Nepomniachtchi, battle for the title, the World Chess Championships, coming in November to Chess.com. And there we are with the round 13 starting in any second of the Speed Chess Championship Super Swiss. And we have Hikaru Nakamura, who is leading so much ahead of other players. And we do need to remind you that Hikaru is not fighting for the top 16 places. He's only fighting for the pride and for the money.
So that means if Hikaru makes it into the top 16, which at this point is pretty much guaranteed, the 17th player will also qualify into the knockout stages to be held tomorrow at the same time. But he is eligible for the $4,000 first prize. And right now, with 1.5 point more than the second placed player, it's pretty much a lock as far as I'm concerned. That Hikaru runs away with the cash prize yet again.
Yes, well, we shouldn't say that yet because there are still 3 rounds. So many things can change in 3 rounds. And here, let's take a look at Benjamin Bok, who is trying now his turn. It is his turn to take down Hikaru. Will he manage to do that?
It's a very tricky position. Benjamin has given away a pawn in the opening. He now goes for the queen trade, and Benjamin knows that the pawn on d5 is not going anywhere. He will be able to recapture it, and he has. But in the exchanges that now happen, it looks dubious whether White will be able to get the full point or whether he's just fighting for a draw. It does appear, though, that Bok is trying to go for the win. He puts his rook in a very aggressive position, pointing both to the left and the right, and having the more active pieces at this stage. But what a tricky move from Hikaru. He moves his bishop up against White's bishop, and if the White bishop captures the Black bishop, then the Black knight will capture the knight in the middle. So he diverted White's bishop away from its defensive responsibilities, and the Black knight now with a double attack both on the rook and the white pawn. It looks as though Hikaru once again is creating some trouble with tricky calculations.
But here you see Hikaru does not go for the pawn, and this is very much understandable because that rook on the 7th rank, I can tell you it is a monster, and that is why Hikaru did not let it stay there.
And Hikaru, if Hikaru was going for a draw here, he would have given away his knight in exchange for the bishop on g4. But the fact that he didn't make this trade tells me that he wants to win this game. And one of the reasons he can do so is that he's planning to move his knight towards the c5 square, where it can stand without ever being attacked by White's pieces.
And look at this rook on a3. Whenever you see such a rook in the endgame, you do understand that something is not right about White's position here.
Yeah, no, it's a very strange play from Benjamin, allowing his rook to get such a passive position. And Hikaru has done well so far, improving the positioning of his pieces. Will it be enough to win? I am not sure. It seems to me that White has a very powerful bishop in the middle. And I feel like Benjamin should be able to come away with this with half a point.
Yes, definitely. Also, what is interesting, White pawns are pretty bad. Look at this pawn structure. Every pawn is weak. Also, the c4 pawn is on the white square, same color as the bishop. So Imagine black had an active king. In this case, black would even fight for a win.
But it's a third time the same position occurs, threefold repetition. Benjamin Bok holds out for a draw. Hikaru remains in the lead of the tournament. And we're going to move on to some of the other players. This is Alexander Zubow, who before this round started, Zubow was in 17th place. And that means he was just barely qualifying because it's the top 17 moving forward since Hikaru is not eligible. It also means that if Zubow doesn't win at least one of his last games, he will be caught and someone else will step in to take that spot in the playoff section tomorrow. And here, white cannot, it's tricky play. The bishop cannot be captured because black had some counter tricks. But now the bishop was captured and white is up a knight. The knight is protected. White is about to win this game, but it's a time scramble. And you give away the rook. No.
Oh, that was a bluff. That was a bluff. Just a hope to win on the pre-moves.
And look at Tigra resigning when the opponent has 6 seconds left. That is some respect right there. But I do believe Zubow would have been able to give the checkmate with a rook in 6 seconds. But it's not a given. And we've seen this earlier, that the players are resigning way too soon, given the precarious time control.
That is correct. And it seems like all the games are about to finish. And that was round 13, which means that we still have Hikaru with 11.5 points out of 13. We now have Hans on Twitch with 10.5 and Mishanik with 10 out of 13. Seems like we still have number 17, who is Dan Laz, and who is now qualifying to this spot. Oh, the round 14 has just started. Let us take a look at Hans on Twitch facing Alexander Zubow.
Hans has made a great recovery after having a very unfortunate encounter with Hikaru Nakamura, where he had a winning position, but Hikaru played very smart to trick Hans and get the win in the end. Had Hans won that game, he would have been the front runner to the $4,000 first prize. But as it stands, Hans will need to win both of his remaining games if he has any hope of catching Hikaru. That's my prediction.
Mathematically speaking, it is still possible. So let us now take a look at what is happening in this game.
Yeah, once again, we see that one of the players have gotten this perfect pawn center. The pawns working together on E4 and D4. When they are on the same square, like what happened now, then you let your opponents get control of some squares as well. So optimally, you want the pawns to be one guy on the light squares and one guy on dark squares. And that's actually what Hans has managed to do here. He just pushed them both forward to make it happen. And Hans has actually sacrificed a pawn in these tricky complications. And in return for the pawn, he has gotten a very dangerous pawn of his own, trying to become a new queen, but also the white queen working together with black's bishop, trying to point down towards the black king.
And I personally do not know which part of it is stronger for white, having such a weak black's king or having such a strong d6 pawn.
I must admit, I really like my pawns. So I have some sympathy here for Hans, who just concentrated on trying to win back the pawn he was missing. But as a result of that, we also see that black is very close to surrendering the pawn on d6. Unfortunately, if it's captured right now, as Dina points out, there's a trick with the bishop pointing in towards the rook and the queen. So Zubow is taking his time here, trying to figure out if he can avoid that bishop trick while still working to get a hold of the dangerous white pawn. And I would say Zubow was pretty successful at that, because now he has the knight ready to move forward in the middle, and the knight will attack both the white queen and the pawn in the middle. Zubow instead chooses to move his king closer. The question is whether this white pawn in the middle will survive the next couple of moves.
Ooh, look at this rook e1, very nice, and queen cannot take the rook. Ooh, and the intermediate check. Looks like the endgame is definitely in white's favor. Once again, we have already pointed it out so many times. This rook on the 7th rank is just an unstoppable rook. Here, well, what is interesting, how do you actually convert this advantage? That's right, you trade the pawns and the knight on g8. When you see this knight, you understand the situation is not good for black.
Yeah, but it's not entirely clear how you give checkmate. And Hans needs to try and keep his pawn on b3. It's very important for Hans to win this, that he has pawns on both sides of the board. And I feel like Zubow should have a different strategy. I feel like Zubow should have been trying to get rid of as many white pawns as possible earlier on. Hans let black's king out of its cage, but at the same time, he managed to win a pawn, another pawn on the right-hand side in the process. And that means he now has 3 versus 1 on that side of the board, and he's ready to push that pawn forward, trying to get a new queen.
Yeah, and seems like this is an easy job for Alexandra, who is about to, for Hans, who is about to convert, because this pawn is just so strong. It's gonna be going to a queen and also the king, black's king. And unfortunately, look at the h8 square. It is of the same color as the bishop.
Yeah, but Hans only has 20 seconds left, and it seems as though he's struggling to figure out how to win this game. He's going for the repetition. Hans gives away the win. He was so nervous. He was so nervous about losing the game on time that he chose to just go for the repetition so that he secures himself a spot in the top placements. But with that repetition, I think his chances of winning the tournament have now gone. And another person who is going to win this is Guzainov, because his opponent, Wonderful Time, only has seconds on the clock. White has a rook in exchange for a knight. Should be enough to win the game. Wonderful Time just has to move immediately on every single situation. And he did a wonderful job staying alive. But in the end, you cannot overcome a 30-second difference, and Guzainov wins in the end. Oh, and Susal, another example. I think this is the 3rd example we've seen of the rooks on the side of the board checkmating the opponent's king. But are there any more games? Yes, Krikor, the Brazilian chess streamer. He is trying to survive with the white pieces in a hopeless situation, and the checkmate comes in with 0.1 seconds on the clock. It's Hong who gets the checkmate at the very last moment and gets a big win against a grandmaster. Nice upset there for the is that the Vietnamese player.
Definitely, what an upset. And we are about to enter to the final round, round 15. Look at Hikaru. He's 1 point leading ahead of everybody. But once again, he's not fighting for the qualification. He's only fighting for the pride and for the money. But who is now making it? Number 17 is now the player Vavrukurt. And let us see what he's doing here against Grandmaster Bogdan Dig?
I like your thinking. Hikaru has already run away with it. Hikaru makes a draw in the final game, which means he is crowned the champion of this Super Swiss, but he will not be participating in the knockouts. So instead, we're focusing our attention on the people who are just so close to getting in among those 16 qualified to tomorrow's knockout stage. Bogdan, definitely one of them, boasting a huge rating, just south of 3,000, but also Yavrukurt from Turkey. He can, with a win here, get himself into tomorrow's knockout.
And look at this position, the bishop on g7. I do not like it at all. Now the knight will come to f4, attacking the g6, because this looks like a dream for white.
Yeah, a fantastic position for white. And Bogdan here knows a win will secure him into the knockout stages tomorrow. He just needs to see this through.
Ooh, what an interesting maneuver from Bogdan. He avoids trading the knights as if he knew the position was close and knights were stronger than the bishops. But I believe it's just a question of time. He will definitely go there back. Or look at this idea. Bishop takes f5. Wow.
I like it. I don't like giving away my pieces. But this bishop sacrificing itself, I approve. But Bogdan, he doesn't want to take any risks. He feels he has a good positional advantage and doesn't need to make any big decisions on the other side of the board. But his problem here is that Yavrukurt has done a great job of playing quickly. So Bogdan is actually down 30 seconds on the clock. And we've seen previously here today how much that time can influence the game.
Now look at this idea, bishop e5 and bishop f6, sacrificing this pawn on a6 in exchange of having a very strong piece, which would though be able to be traded. I'm not sure anymore about that. Bishop h3, now knight c4. Ooh, rook takes a4.
That was an aggressive move from black, but it actually gave away the protection of an important pawn on the side of the board. Bogdan Deak has capitalized on that, moving his rook into position. And are we about to see some fiery tactics? What is about to happen here? No, black couldn't really deal with the loss of the pawn. He didn't have any tricks, which means that white is firmly in control here. White has why would he give away the bishop like that? A terrible decision from white. And now the black queen is trying to infiltrate in towards white's king. The white king is not happy with how much defense has been left to its rescue. And right now, I think Bogdan is in real trouble. I think both players are going for the win. Both players going to checkmate the opponent's king. But the bar on the left-hand side is showing mostly black, which means that the computer engines feel that black has a winning position.
Yeah, and black is first here indeed. Wow. All right, still 25 seconds for Bogdan Dig, but here we have such a big advantage for black. It is going to be a win, I assume, for black.
Yeah, it's the time more than anything, the problem, because white has the ability to create a lot of tricks, and black doesn't really have that many pawns left. If there's no pawns left, bishop and rook versus rook is a draw in theory. So I think most of white's troubles right now is the time situation, and you're struggling to stay afloat there. But Bogdan so far doing a great job of offering rook exchanges, which would work in his favor. the bishop comes back into defense. The black rook manages to capture many pawns. 3 white pawns got captured there in the span of just seconds. This position is still not easy for black to win, but it's easy for black to win on time. And now the king in trouble on the side of the board. Bogdan resigns, and that means Yavruk has catapulted himself up into the 17 who qualify for the knockout stages tomorrow. And it also means that Bogdan is out. He is no longer among the top 16.
Yeah, that is correct. And here we have Benjamin Bach here, who is about to lose his game, and that would be a very big misfortune for him because he's also fighting for that spot. And there we go. The game finished in a win for black.
Benjamin was number 17, but with that loss, he moves down the standings, and that means he's out as well. Here, Sanan Shugirov wins on time in the very last game of the event. The tournament is over, and that means we have our qualifiers and we have our champion. Hikaru Nakamura takes the $4,000 first prize, but because he's already in the Speed Chess Championship main event, he is not eligible to play the knockout stages tomorrow, which means instead, we're going to be seeing Miss Hanik, we're going to be seeing Hans, and at the end of the standings, it's Shield 12 who gets the unfortunate honor of being the first player not to qualify for tomorrow, and Sarah coming in clutch gets the 16th spot.
Wow. Not only she gets a 16th spot, but she also should be winning a prize for the best female participant. That is an amazing result.
And we're going to be seeing more from her tomorrow.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the tomorrow event. Tomorrow we're going to have a different event. Tomorrow we'll be having an increment, 1 second increment. We will be having 2 games of 5 minutes plus 1 second increment for the round of 16 within 2 games, 3 minutes plus 1 second increment, and then 5 games, 1 minute plus 1 second increment. This is the format for tomorrow for the round of 16. But Jon, we also have quarterfinals. And what is the format for this one?
We're going to be keeping the kind of speed chess format. So in the Speed Chess Championship main event, you have some games 5+1, some games 3+1, and some games 1+1. And we're going to be having that same structure for the entire knockout event. It's just that as we get closer to the decisive games, we're increasing the number of chances. So there's an extra game. For instance, in the finals, there's an extra 3-minute game and 2 extra 1-minute games.
That is correct. And let us now take a look at the prizes. What do we expect to see tomorrow in the knockout?
So there's already prizes for the Swiss, but if you've made it to the prizes in the Swiss, you also get a chance to win prizes in the knockout. And they are pretty much the same as in the Swiss.
We, again, $4,000 as a main place, but place number 1 is not about money. It is about qualification to the main event, which comes in November. And once again, let us remind our viewers that this is the last time. This was the last chance to fight for the one left spot in the main event. We will also have one junior that is going to be decided next. But as far as for now, Jon, it has been a big pleasure for me to work together with you. It was our first time, and I am extremely happy to have had this opportunity to commentate these amazing games with you.
Likewise, it was a thrilling day, non-stop action. That's what you get with these 3-minute games. And this was 2 hours of intense play. Tomorrow, the broadcast will start at the same time, but it's actually going to last 3 times longer, where we're going to be spending 6 hours, if not more, to find our qualifier for the Speed Chess main event.
That is going to be intense. So do not go anywhere, and see you tomorrow.